My connection to Indian music is purely that I feel from a heart and soul level, I was very connected to the melodies and the rhythms.
Tell us about the pivot from an engineer releasing products. Tell us about what it really took for you to leave a comfortable paying job to go into something that had a lot of uncertainty, quite frankly.
Much of it is really stepping into your version of your future self, really getting clear on what that looks like.
There are people who are there for your future self, and there are people who are there with your current self or past self. But as you're going through that metamorphosis, you're trying to find that community of folks who can be with you along that journey.
Seema, we're back with another episode for the Happy and Human podcast. How are you feeling today?
Feeling great.
Awesome. You know, social media, when I got onto it a couple of years ago and I stopped using it to show my latte or to stalk what my friends were doing, which would give me FOMO, and I started using it for actually the podcast and brand building, it just opened my eyes to what an incredible tool it is for connecting.
I could not agree more. So many of the wonderful things I've gotten to do in this life are a direct result of having been on social media and connecting in a really meaningful and authentic way.
Yeah. And, you know, with the Ambani wedding, I was scrolling and there's so many Indian people who are doing amazing things. And I came across this guy who is with us, and I'm excited to introduce him. And he started with, what if this song was remade in English? And the song was Papa Kehte Hai, right? From, I think it's Kaimat Se Kaimat Tak, right? Is that the movie? I think it is. And I reached out to Vivek, and Vivek and I had an amazing text exchange, and we even had a Zoom chat. And I was like, dude, you got to come on to the podcast because he is one of the most inspiring people on social media today. Everyone, Vivek Agrawal. How are you, Vivek?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me, and it's nice to see both of you.
Yes, welcome to Happy and Human. We're so excited you're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And, you know, the more you get to know Vivek, you can't help but, you know, fall in love with his voice, fall in love with his story. And we're just really excited to have a chance to spend a few minutes in your world, Vivek, and get to know you.
Well, I'm very excited. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah. And we have a secret pattern interrupt for today's episode. So listeners, make sure you listen all the way through. And I promise you'll be delighted with a treat.
Delighted is probably an understatement.
Yeah. So Vivek, tell us, take us back to as far back as we need to go to understand who is Vivek Agrawal, what doesn't come through, and tell us about your journey. And we want to talk about the pivot into full-time music because I just feel that is such a powerful story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will say that every journey for a creative or an artist is always unique. I think for me, I've always been one to live in this duality. Growing up, I was very interested in technology and school and all the things around academics. I was a math nerd and a computer science geek. But at the same time, I had a huge passion for music. There was, you know, a piano and a harmonium laying around in our house. And for some reason, I was drawn to expressing myself through those melodies. And I think for a long time, it felt like, oh, I'll kind of do that, but I'll do this, you know, tech career instead. And largely because I was interested in it. And I would say things really changed once I got to college. I did my undergrad at Stanford. I was learning a lot of things about tech out there, both from Silicon Valley in the industry, as well as through classes and the students that I was meeting. And it was a lot of passion. And at the same time, I joined this a cappella group in college that was specializing in South Asian music. And that's when I really fell in love with the art of singing and arranging music and collaborating with other people. And it took me on a whole different journey than I would have ever expected.
So did you grow up singing at all?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I was in choir. I would sing at like school shows, you know, or like family events and, you know, for friends' houses and stuff. But I never really thought I was going to take it as seriously as I did. But once I got into college, I truly fell in love with it.
So interesting. I remember growing up and there were always a few kids that had voices that were better than the rest, right? And you could tell that some of them would take singing lessons, they sang in choir, they would sing at their church or whatever. And um, it was always interesting to see them have that as an outlet. And it always sounded so beautiful, even when you're like fifth, sixth grade, right? So I was just imagining little Vivek with his like math book and also like bopping along to some, I don't know what movie was popular then. I don't even remember, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's like fixing what calculus equations while jamming to some Bollywood.
Yeah.
I love it. When you said a cappella group, it took me back to in college. You guys remember Pen Masala?
I was
Yeah.
thinking the same thing.
Yeah, Pen Masala. I imagine that's what it was like at Stanford, right? That
Yeah,
a
we
cappella
had
group.
an a cappella group called Ragapella.
Oh,
So good.
Yeah. And so
I
we
love
were
it.
doing a lot of music. I thought Pat Masala had done like awesome music and arrangements back in the day, and so it was exciting to see what they've done and see how we could build on it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Hey, so you mentioned something for the first time in our conversation, the duality between tech and music. And
Mhm.
something we've talked a lot about on this show is the duality between cultures, right?
Mhm.
Desi culture at home and wanting to fit into whatever prevalent American culture you're exposed to. And, at least for me, even though I was Indian, we celebrated Diwali, I wasn't outwardly living showing my love for Bollywood or wanting to eat, samosas in my lunch and things like that. I grew up in Florida, and at best, people thought I was Mexican, right?
Mhm.
There was an Indian restaurant, Indian grocery store, things like that. Did the duality of the music help or hurt or inhibit the duality between cultures? Like, were you able to stay connected to the Indian side of you because of the music, or was that more of an escape from sort of the duality that came from living in America and growing up in America?
Mm.
I feel very grateful for having grown up in America. I was born in the suburbs of Chicago. I made a lot of friends here, and growing up, and I personally never felt uncomfortable with that. I'm very proud to be American. I love
Mhm.
this country, and I love like everything that it's provided for me, my family, and all that. So I think for me, my connection to Indian music is purely that I feel from a heart and soul level, I was very connected to the melodies and the rhythms.
Mm.
I grew up speaking English. I have been trying to learn Hindi and like get better at it. But for me, I felt like the melodies and the expression that was coming, even just from the way the words sounded, those were the things that drew me in. And so I truthfully, like, I was just like, oh, these are fun songs to sing because I like how I sounded them, even regardless of the meaning. And then as I learned from my parents and friends and even the internet, like what these songs meant, I was like, wow, there's really deep meaning and beauty to that.
Yes.
And so
Mhm.
Yeah.
the thing that I had found very interesting was I have experienced this beauty from a melodic level, but how can more people get to experience that? And whether that's someone who grew up in India, someone who grew up in here and knows a lot about the culture, someone who knows nothing about the culture, someone who's curious about it, like I want them to be able to have the chance to experience and appreciate that music and feel that magic that I did.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think for those of us who share the South Asian heritage, the Indian heritage, and are growing up here, a lot of the disconnect is, well, I don't know what they're saying in
Yeah.
the songs, right? And
Yeah.
and that in and of itself can be almost a turnoff to Bollywood and all of the things, even though the songs themselves are so catchy and they're so energetic, especially the happy ones. I feel like they really just kind of get in your body and make you feel great. But it's always when you peel back the layers of the meanings behind those words, I think you do a great job of actually translating as accurately as one can from one language to the other. But I think it's a very difficult task to do. These words are just very difficult to translate. And I think you do a great job.
Oh, thank you. And so truthfully, I think there's a few things I believe. One is that music itself is a universal language, right? So it doesn't matter what specific forms of the consonants and vowels that are coming through. That's like one form of expression for that, but it's about the feeling that comes from it. I think a lot of people have gravitated to music from, South America or like Puerto Rico or like Mexico, a lot of music in like Latin culture, a lot of music from like even K-pop. There's also been songs from India and from the UK and even Canada that have reached global scale, right? And
Yeah.
so I think when something connects, it just connects. Now, that being said, I do think that whatever we can do to reduce the inhibitions or reduce what it takes for someone to adopt the music is always interesting. The insight to remake a lot of these songs and was really, again, merely out of like intellectual curiosity for me. I'm a full-time singer and composer. I've made a number of albums that I'm actively performing and working to release. But I've been very curious, like, oh, well, if I were to reinterpret a song from Bollywood or from Indian culture, what's a way to reinterpret that would be interesting? And so at first, I remember thinking, well, could I do it in English? And that's kind of how it started. And even for me personally, I wasn't sure, but I was like, and part of the reason is because, well, I know the melodies and I know the way those words in, Hindi or Urdu or Punjabi or any other language fit really well with the melodies. But are there ways to both select and curate English words that sound nice with the melody, but also capture the essence of the song? And so I take that very seriously, just in the sense that the composer, the singer, the lyricist, there's a whole team of people that work on these songs, right? And if I were going to put the time into it, I want to do justice, or at least do my best to, interpret the song in a way that captures the soul of it.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, like mohabbat, or becheni. How do you, I don't know of really a way. Love isn't quite the same as mohabbat, and
right.
Restless isn't really becheni. It's so I think you just do a great job of honoring the whole process of the original song and then bringing it forward.
Thank you. I
in a new
really
language.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Because we're all Googling the English lyrics, right? Like there's so many quotes. And one of my questions were, do you actually translate it based on your understanding? Or is there a website that you go for the lyrics? Because, we're only getting a snippet with you. And sometimes we want to know, like, what does that mean in English? How do we think of it? So it's cool to hear that you're reimagining them for your renditions.
Oh yeah. I mean, it definitely takes time, and I mean, for every song when I'm writing lyrics, I may be inspired by a few lines or, really what's the general essence of the song. And then in some ways I have to detach from what that is so that my mind and creativity can let loose and figure out, well, what's the story that I could tell based on having that feeling. And then usually I end up writing something, and then I'll go upstairs. I work down in the basement, and I'll just go talk to my parents and like, hey, here's this. What do you think?
So good.
Yeah, pretty fun.
I love that they've been a supportive part of your journey here.
Oh yeah, they've been very, very supportive. I mean, they're my biggest fans. I go to them for advice. I go to them for any feedback, and they're honest with me. They're very open with me, so that they can tell me when something is good. They can tell me when it's something I need to work on, and I think that's also important as an artist, right? Because to some extent, you need delusional support, because what someone is doing when they're creating anything, whether it's art or business or anything, it's very difficult. It's very lonely, because the tendency is to hear, no, it can't be done, right? And the person who's creating it has to have a little bit of craziness in them to say, I don't care that everyone says, no, this can't be done. I'm going to do it anyways. And then they need a good support system who knows how to bring them up when they're feeling down and encourage them, even though there's times when it may not be hitting the mark. And at the same time, if it's not working, like, let you know.
Yeah. So I actually, when you said delusional support, that was real. My brain just lit up. And as you know, on the show, we talk a lot about not only the work that Dinesh and I do and our guests do, but the mindset behind it and how what gets us there. And so I was curious if you could share with us that voice. What is your process? What does it feel like for you when you're in this flow state, or maybe right before you tap into that flow state of creativity? we hear that voice of, well, that can't be done. And oftentimes the delusion comes from, you create your own separate delusion of why, and you believe it faster than anybody else, and their reasons for saying why it can't be done. So I'm just curious if you could share with our listeners a little bit of what that's like for you and how you overcome it and how you actually crack through to ingenuity.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you to say. I think the first part to that question is creating I think the answer to that is, how do I create an environment under which I feel safe to be in flow? So for me, I have a pretty set routine where I'm going to wake up. I'll make sure to work out and go on a run. I have a consistent meal for breakfast or lunch. And it's the sort of thing that after waking up, it just puts me in my nervous system into a very calm state. Right. Mm-hmm. So then it's just cool. I've done the things that I needed to do. So then even if nothing else happens today, I worked out.
Yeah.
Right.
That.
And so I feel okay, I've had that happen. Now, again, I'm a full-time musician, right? This is the only thing I do. And I've made decisions in my life to be able to do that. And at the same time, I have a very different lifestyle, right? I'm not spending much money on expenses because I'm focused on the art, and I don't do as many things as others because I'm just well, the focus is on the art. So that allows me to be in a state of mind where I can allow for serendipity to happen. So an example of this is, there's sometimes a song that I want to recreate or remake and or even write. If I said, hey, I need to get this song done by tomorrow, nothing happens. But if I put myself in a position where I know that this song is something I'm thinking about, then maybe the inspiration strikes when I'm making a meal. Maybe it strikes when I'm on a run. Maybe it strikes when I'm just sitting around, or even when I'm in a conversation with someone. And I allow myself to say, okay, if that's happening and I find it, I just say I have to go and work.
Okay.
Yeah. So that at least relieves the pressure that something needs to happen at a certain amount of time. And again, I will admit that I currently have a lifestyle that allows me to do that not everyone has, right? But that's at least what has worked for me. The second piece is, once I've had that inspiration, just being able to go as far down the line as I can to assemble the vision and show what's possible. Some songs, particularly when I'm remaking an old song, from the 70s or 60s, there's a very the original arrangement is so beautiful, and the original words are so beautiful, especially as they put so much time into it. They still do, right? That it's almost hard to reimagine it being something else. So there's more pressure to get it done right. But allowing myself to be in that position where I'm okay, I'm going to try it, and if it works, I'm onto something. If it doesn't, that's okay, and being able to let go of that effort, I think that has helped quite a bit.
Detachment from the outcome.
Yes, but then still going hard at trying to get to something beautiful.
The dharmic pursuit is kind of what comes to mind.
So, Vivek, you were a Bose engineer, right? And you have claim to fame on some tech that is out in the marketplace. What is that tech?
Well, I before pursuing music full time, I was a music technologist for over a decade. I had worked on a music startup with one of my friends from college. We spent 10 years building all kinds of stuff. One of the things that we created with a team of engineers and cross-disciplinary folks was these audio sunglasses called the Bose Frames. So they played music. They looked, like a pair of sunglasses. Nothing went in your ears, and no one could hear anything. And actually, Seema, we did announce that product at South by Southwest in Austin back in 2018. So that's when I was spending time in Austin those 2 years. So
I missed you.
Yeah. I think it was fun.
It's a fun city.
Yeah.
That's cool. So tell us about the pivot from an engineer releasing products for the consumers and really being at the cutting edge, because I don't think that concept of a wearable that allows you to consume information either visually or audio, I mean, not headphones, but I'm talking about an eyeglass concept, was still in its infancy. We didn't have the Quest or the Apple Vision, things like that. But you pivoted to full-time music. Tell us about that pivot and what it really took for you to leave a comfortable paying job, a set career trajectory, to go into something that had a lot of uncertainty, quite frankly.
For sure. Well, I think there's a few ways to answer that question. I think part of it is, for me, even my own journey in technology was filled with uncertainty and a lot of questions. Anytime you're in the cutting edge of something, you don't know if it's going to work. Certainly, one can look at an idea that has manifested and gotten traction, say, "Oh, that was going to work." But back in 2016, when we were ideating or starting to work on these sorts of ideas, they were so ahead of their times that people wouldn't be sure if they could work, right?
Yeah.
And part of that, at least as a risk taker, is knowing that, hey, there's going to be some skeptics, but there's still going to be people who see the full vision 10 years from now. And I credit my co-founder and the team we had and the leadership and mentorship that we had to have enough people to support us, right? And who believed even if the world didn't believe. And I think that feeling is consistent no matter what journey someone takes who's going to embrace risk. I think, and I say this having been a musician now for like 4 or 5 years and knowing that fully, that I believe there's a lot of this that's related. I think the biggest difference in the pivot from basically tech entrepreneurship into being a musician is, I think with business, a lot of times the logic starts from the market, right? That you start with, here's this amazing technology, but then you seek the market for it really quickly. I know that for my own journey as a musician, I really wanted to make the music that I wanted to make. And perhaps that's where like the delusion came in, is that, well, it's like, I want to make this music. I believe a lot of people are going to enjoy this music. So I'm willing to take the leap of faith and believe in myself. And the restart, quite frankly, was finding that community of people who could support me and mentor me during that level of delusion.
Yeah.
So much of it is really stepping into your version of your future self.
Yeah.
And really getting clear on what that looks like. I know we've talked about that on the show off and on. But it just goes to show, I think, how important it is to recognize that there's a future version of you that exists that might be different than the current existence you're living in, and focusing on ways to build that support so that you can access that future now.
Yeah. And I think there's another piece, which is that there are people who are there for your future self, and there are people who are there with your current self or past self. But as you're going through that metamorphosis, you're trying to find that community of folks who can be with you along that journey. I've been grateful again that my family has been like a constant source of support as I've been going through many, many changes. And I've been also blessed to have, good friends and, other people in the industry who believe in what I was doing. And, but I want to point out that that's not easy to come by.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it almost takes a blind faith. And this reminds me a little bit of when we started the law firm. One thing that really surprised me is, when you're starting anything, it's hard to see how things will get done or who will come into your life to give you a little bit of information or a lead or a tip to go to a conference that's going to make such a huge difference. And one thing that occurred for me is that I was shocked at the number of people that were in my atmosphere, that I knew them, but they had or were able to be a resource in a way that I couldn't predict at all. So when we started the law firm, it was surprising how many people had information or contacts or things like that I only needed after we started the law firm, but didn't before. And out of the woodwork, someone would come along and say, hey, you should think of it this way, or you should do this, or you should meet this person, or this is a way of doing it. And I was like, dude, I had no idea that you could help me in this way. right? And I think, testament to everything that we're doing, right? I mean, Seema, I think you worked with our friend Stephanie, and
Mhm.
until you take that first step and put yourself out there in one way or
Yeah.
another, you don't really activate those resources. But the last point I want to make, I feel it's also important not to be too attached to that future self that gives you the start. Because at least for our podcast, for us, and for Vivek, from what I understand for you, success comes in an unexpected way. It's
Yeah.
never or very seldom in the way that you planned it for it to go,
I thought I
right?
was gonna do one remake.
What do you mean?
I was just like, oh, this would be like kind of fun to do. Let me just do it once. And the level of serendipity on this is my friend was getting married in Miami, and she and her, now husband wanted me to sing at their wedding. And I was in a group chat with two of my friends, and I was saying, well, there's this song called Rata Lambia. I kind of like it. And I was like, oh, sure. Well, I was actually thinking I might remake that in English. And she's like, oh, really? Like, actually, we'd really like that. And so then
Wow.
I literally just started remaking the song, and I made the background, and I wrote the lyrics and put the vocals. Like, yeah, I'll sing at this wedding. And then, oh, yeah, I'll record something on TikTok. That's it
So
was,
true.
yeah. But and to be honest, like the way it happened, I mean, I remember singing it at the wedding, and then I was with my parents in Miami, and then on Wednesday morning decided to post a video on TikTok, and then I remember we posted it, and usually I get like 5 likes. I'm like, whatever. This is like the 10 followers that follow me, and by the end of the day, it had like 200 likes, and my
Wow.
parents and I were like, "Wow, this is a big deal. We should all celebrate." And then I don't know,
Yeah.
we had dinner, but we thought that was the end of it. And then I remember the next day, I woke up and it had like 120,000 views.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we were still in Miami, and my parents and I were like, "Yeah, you need to go home." So we like flew home. I started analyzing everything about what was going on, and I was like, "Oh, I guess people want to hear this." And then I was just back to work.
Wow.
What did you find from the analysis?
um, I thought the coolest thing was that the community of people who resonated with this music were non-Indian. They were
Mm.
Indo-curious folks outside. I mean, TikTok is banned in India, right? And then
Yeah.
it's in
Indo-curious. Wait, and
Indo.
I just want to
I've
highlight
never
Indo-curious. I've never
They
heard
were
that word.
no
they were
curious.
Indo-curious, and it's interesting. So, and I've learned this as I've talked to friends who live in these countries. But like the places where I was getting traction initially were like Malaysia, like the Philippines, or like Guyana, and like Trinidad, and like South Africa.
Wait. You said Guyana?
Yeah.
I'm from Guyana. I was
Oh,
born in
nice.
I was born in Guyana.
Okay, that's awesome. So you can tell me, okay? So
Yeah.
what I found from the folks in Malaysia is like there's actually a large community of like Chinese Malay who don't understand Hindi, but Bollywood is very prevalent in the culture. So they've watched all the movies and they listened to all the music.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, and then I saw them not only like liking and commenting, but they were like singing along to the videos. And
Mm.
I was quite amazed.
Yeah.
It was an honor. It was like amazing that it resonated. I'm still very touched by all of it. And I was just like, oh wow, this is hitting on something way different from what I expected.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And of course, like since then, I've been fortunate enough to start growing on Instagram as well, and there I'm capturing a lot more of like the Indian diaspora in India
Sure.
and other followers as well. But that community that is something I frankly didn't even know existed, but
Mhm.
it's amazing, and it kind of going back to original point around like, well, can this music go global? Can this music reach people outside of who we expect? And the answer is yes.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
just I didn't expect it.
And it makes total sense because when I found the song, it was the tune that was nostalgic for me.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you could put English to it, and I really felt connected. And it makes sense, like in Trinidad and Guyana, where there's the Indian ancestry.
Yes.
that allows you to be exposed to like old Bollywood.
Right.
It makes you feel like home, right?
Yes.
Would you be up for singing Rata Lambia?
Sure, I'll sing a little bit.
We're putting him on the spot.
I know. I have everything connected with my piano, so let's see how this does. Feel it in my heart, you're the only one for me. Even when I dream, you're the only one I see. Wanna be with you, wanna be with you, wanna be with you. Come along with me and I'll love you till the end. Even when I'm down, just remember I'm your friend. Wanna be with you, wanna be with you, wanna be with you. Can you be my lady? You're worth the fight. Will you hear me, baby? Stay another night. Que rata lambiya lambiya re. Kate tere sange re. Que rata lambiya lambiya re. Kate tere sange re.
Oh my God. I mean, studio audience, what do you think about that?
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh man. I mean, you are unbelievably talented.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
Seema, did that give you chills?
It did. Oh my gosh. So good. So good. And also, I'm still stuck on Indo-curious because I'm Gujarati.
Oh,
and in Gujarati, you know, Indo is like an egg, right? So I'm like, egg curious? Like Indo-curious, not Indo-curious.
That's us. Thank you. My parents are Gujarati as well, so I appreciate that.
I love it.
Yeah,
You're never going to think of that word the same way again.
I know. I really won't.
I'm not. I want to think about Indo-Chinese, which is my favorite food, but now I'm like, oh, who's Indo-curious? Are you Indo-curious?
Yeah. Well, no, it's honestly like it was a surprise. Okay, and where you're talking about like the magic and the serendipity of the internet, putting yourself out there to like no one listening, you know, and suddenly once you catch, it is quite a drug. I'll admit that, but at the same time, that detachment keeps me very grounded because I'm just like, well, they're here because they like the art. So then I just have a duty to create the art, right? And so, but it has been amazing to see, you know, this sort of resonance that people have had to the music. It's been fun thinking through, you know, all the songs. So I try to I definitely remake a different song every week. That's my commitment for the rest of the year. So I've done around like 36 or 37, and I'm gonna get to 52 pretty soon. But yeah, it's been fun, like listening to all these different songs, like finding different artists who are like making new music, you know, emerging artists who are doing stuff, like established artists and like, you know, timeless songs. I've just had a blast, and it's been a nice way to just, you know, explore the music that's part of, you know, South Asian culture and then bring it out to the world.
Yeah, I love that. You know, you touched on in just this time so many high performance habits, if you will, that a lot of leaders talk about. Things like constraint and commitment, right? Like you committing to one song a week and having that be a measurable, I guess, marker of am I on track with my goals and things like that. You talked about constraint and the importance of not really having any in some way too, which I kind of wanted to pull apart a little bit because you mentioned it in terms of time. You know, we have detachment from outcome as well. That was another high performance habit, but you talked about not attaching too much on time. I want to get this done by this whatever. And essentially what that does is it cuts you off from that flow state of serendipity and being able to put things together. I was just on a call yesterday with a good friend of mine who we were talking about how Dr. Benjamin Hardy had said, it's important if you have big goals to actually, if you think you need 2 years, you know, make it 6 months or, you know, so actually move that time up faster and make it shorter than you think. So I'm curious to know, how do you balance like something like that versus, no, I need to just allow for the universal energy to flow through me and almost quantum leap time that way?
I have a few thoughts on this. They may be disconnected, but feel free to choose what you will from this.
Yeah.
Part one is that it is very easy to want to get to success sooner, but sometimes it takes time to attract what's meant for you. And there's things that, the human as the vessel needs to do in order to be able to attract that. And then the universe also needs time to align itself to make sure that you get what you want. I have found that anytime I've rushed something, it either doesn't work or it just doesn't get done well. And at the same time, sometimes those eureka moments happen and, something can happen in an instant, right? But so it doesn't mean that something doesn't happen fast or something doesn't happen slow. And there are certainly ideas of momentum that once you catch something, then, your chart gets ready, is set. But like I think about, for example, if this moment happened to me in 2020, if this was the first thing I did and then I'd gone viral and, started growing, then, well, one, I wouldn't have known what to do with this in the same way. I wouldn't have had the same insights around like what the industry is really like that I did as, frankly, a struggling artist trying to figure it out. I've learned a lot more as a result. I wouldn't have been able to create a lot of my original songs and art. I have like entire albums that are already done. Right. And so for me, I look at this as a lot of ways like, oh, this is another album that I can do. And this seems to be the first album that people want to hear. So I can perform it and I can tour with it. And then if people want to listen, that's wonderful. And then I'm happy to share some of my original music too. And then they can enjoy those. But it's one of those things where I do believe that the world can help you plan to get to that goal that you want in the end sooner. But I don't know, there's also just magic that happens, even with, I think about it with tech too, right? Which is like another industry that feels disconnected. Like the number of times, a startup is working on a particular idea and then it's not working and they pivot to something completely different and then everything just blows up.
Yeah. Such is life.
Yeah.
You just never know what's going to take off and when it does. And
exactly.
I love too that you talked about when you did start to go viral and you had those 200 likes. I love how you shared that you and your parents celebrated that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's so important, at least for me, and clearly for you and your family. That was important for you to mark that without any attachment to what it might mean or what it does mean, or just being in the moment of, hey, this is pretty cool.
Just grateful that it happened.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because I remember before, again, when I finished an album, my first album was like, oh, well, I'm going to like do a big party. And I put a lot of expectations, assuming something was going to happen. Right. And instead, I've learned, okay, I'm going to just celebrate the moments as they come because they may not come again. Right. And when I got to 100,000 followers, my parents and I went to dinner. Right. And then when I started, I said, well, I'll celebrate again at like, 200K. And then frankly, 200K came so fast. I was very shocked. And then by the time we celebrated, it was already at 250,000 followers. It was like,
wow.
So, but again, I'm very grateful for the whole thing. The biggest thing is just like celebrating the small wins, right? Yeah. And just because they are wins, right? And it's about what we think of them and, how they make us feel. And at the same time, it's all just part of a journey anyways. So.
Oh,
so
gosh. Good. Well, I'm like moved to tears, really, truly. You are hitting so many things that I think my soul really, truly needed to hear.
Tima's promised to take me out to the most expensive dinner I've ever been once we hit 10,000 downloads.
Nice.
And we're like this close.
We're this close. So listeners, listen, Dinesh is hungry and he wants to buy him dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
We're so close.
That's awesome.
So Vivek, what's hard? Because you're making it look so easy. We want to know the challenges. We want to know, you're telling us that you're committing to doing a remake every week. And, we see a 90-second clip on social media and it just looks like it took 5 minutes to put together. But now that I know that's not true, you have a full-time job at this, right?
Yeah, this is
And
for sure.
what's hard, what is pulling you forward, and most importantly, what would you say to someone who doesn't have that magnetism to what they do, to where they continue going through the challenges and the obstacles. They find a way to make it work. And I know you're living in Chicago, you're caring for your parents. We've talked about the times I've had to go down to Florida to care for my parents, and it is very, very difficult. And what I want to leave people with is that there's a way to go through that in a way that is inspiring, and that the difficulty doesn't mean that it can't be done still.
Yes. Before I answer that question, I wanted to get one clarifying thing, which is you said something about magnetism. What
Yes.
did you mean by that?
The magnetism of that you have towards music, right? It's almost like it's the music, and wanting to get your music out there is pulling you forward. And sometimes we're in careers, or we're doing something that maybe we've lost our way a little bit. We don't feel our purpose. It isn't important any longer, and the doubt creeps in. And once we let the doubt creep in, I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this? Is it even worth it? Look at the sacrifices I have to make to not spend time on working out, or not spend time with my family or kids. Why am I putting myself through this? But for those of us that are committed to something, that magnetism just pulls us through. And I was reading a quote from Naval Ravikant earlier today, and it's something like, he's like, it looks like work to you, it feels like work to you, but to me it feels like play. And because it doesn't feel like work, I can do it 16 hours a day. And if you still feel like it's work, like, the game's over. How are you going to beat me? Because I could do this all day long. Right? That's what I mean by that thing that has magnetized you to keep going.
Let's start with that question, and then we can move into what's hard, because I think you've hit on something very interesting around the discouragement that one can feel, right? The persistence that's required. All of it sounds like a lot of labor, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's you're doing your quote dream job, or what you thought was your dream job, or a job that's completely unideal at all, or again, even if you're not necessarily at a point in your career where you're or your life where you're focused on career for whatever reason, there are many reasons to feel discouraged, right? There's no question. What I have found for myself is that I have taken this life and every moment with gratitude. I have gratitude that you reached out to me and that we're here having this conversation right now. I have gratitude for the fact that I get to spend this time to work on a song, and with unknown results. And I'm just like, wait, that's the life that I'm getting to think through. There's another version of that, which is like, oh man, I did a song, it didn't do super well, or oh, I have to do this. And when everything becomes shouldered as a responsibility, everything will feel like work, and it'll feel very discouraging to do anything. But if we look at it, all of these as opportunities and honors, we start to have a lot more, I don't know, at least for me personally, I feel a lot happier in life, because I'm just like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting to do this right now.
Yeah. And I feel like what you're getting, or I'm getting from that, is that happiness and that gratitude is really what inspires you to keep at it more and achieve more without it taxing you in the process.
Correct. Yeah. And so kind of leading into your other question, like, I think those are the things that, while it's hard to preserve that mindset, I do my best to go back to that root, so that it keeps me going, right? So even if there's other things that interrupt, a regularly scheduled life, it's like, well, I'm gonna go back to that center. I do think that the things that make it hard are really, you can have like unrealistic delusion, which is awesome when you're like trying to do something very difficult. Obviously, being grounded and guarded around like how much time it may take, or whether you can be successful. So making sure and defining even what success means. So I think there's something important to being detached from that success, or detached from that outcome, and looking at it for what it is. So there's one version of the world under which the rock star is, selling out stadium tours around the world. There's another version of the rock star that's, at home, composing for the internet. There's another version of the rock star who, gets to perform at local places for their friends and enjoy time with their family. And there's another version of the rock stars like, yeah, I get to enjoy really good music, right? All of those
Yeah.
lives are valid, right?
Yeah. You're reminding me of the quote by Rudyard Kipling, to meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same.
Yeah, for sure.
That's good.
And what's interesting, I really like that quote because it's easy to look at disasters, right, or bad things as like, oh, that shouldn't have happened, right? So we react stronger to them. But I think when good things happen to us, we almost treat ourselves as godlike, right? And I think that Kipling quote is very humbling because it shows that both of them are just moments.
And extremely inspiring. I can't even, I don't have the language and the words yet to articulate how just inspiring you are for everything you stand for. From putting your music out there, telling us how success came, the gratitude that you show. You are the definition of a rock star, not in just the musical terms, right?
Yeah. So what comes across for me is not even the effect is that you are inspiring, but really the way I see it, you are living an inspired life. Like that's just who you are, is an inspired human being. And one of the byproducts of that is that you inspire others to do all of these things in ways that make sense for them. It may not be music. It may be starting a business or having a child or, whatever it is, creating a recipe. But I think that's what's so moving is the authentic way you show your zest for life and how inspired you are by all the moments that it can offer.
Thank you. And all of those things that you mentioned, they're all beautiful missions in life, right? We're all human. And the purpose, part of it is we're trying to discover that purpose. At some point, we're trying to rediscover that purpose. Both of them will happen, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And not only are you living an inspired life, but you're doing it in a way that is really touching a lot of people across many different nations, as we talked about, many different genres, many different backgrounds. And you've gotten the opportunity to work with bigger and bigger stars and rock stars. Tell us about some of the people that you've collabed with that we might hear from you soon on your upcoming releases of albums and singles and things like that.
For sure. I'm happy to chat a little bit about, some of the folks that I've worked with in the past, some of my performances and all that. My first foray in like professional music industry, I was very grateful for it. It was to work with Bollywood composer and Oscar-winning composer AR Rahman. So after college, I moved to studios in Chennai, and I was working on a lot of soundtracks with him. I got to know a lot of people on his team. I was invited to perform at some of his shows. It was a very magical experience, and I'm very grateful for it. And it taught me a lot about what it's like to operate at like such excellence. So that was amazing. And that was my foray into music. And then, afterwards, again, I really was interested and keen to pursue a technology and a career in music tech. And so that's why I was back here, and I grew up here, and so I lived in LA in the Bay and doing that. When I started pursuing music, I reconnected with some of my colleagues and friends from the Indian film music industry, and there's some collaborations on that are coming out pretty soon that I'm very excited to share more on. But in the meantime, I've also had the opportunity to perform at some like awesome places. I opened for Shankar Mahadevan at a show last year in for like an India Day performance. This year, I'm opening for Kailash Kher at one of his shows in the Chicago area, performing for a gala at the Field Museum with a nonprofit called the American Indian Foundation. I'm just really grateful to be able to be able to even do any of this, and that it resonates with folks. And I'm always open to collaborating with anyone who has similar values around like the sort of music and the way we think about art. And I'm excited for where that serendipity will go.
You are just a breath of fresh air. You're such an inspiration, musical talent, and we can't wait to see more from you. And whenever your albums are out, we want you to come back and do a live concert. I think at some
Oh
point
my
for
gosh.
our
Yes.
We
community.
can do one in DC and Austin. That'd be awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
now that sounds fantastic. I
Yeah.
truly feel the energy that you bring to the table just right through the screen. And it is, I feel like my own nervous system is more attuned to drop into flow now that we've had this conversation. So listeners, I hope you guys are soaking it into truly, this is just mind blowing.
So good. And, we keep talking about it, but I am having visions of a Happy and Human conference, and the evening dinner is wrapped up, and the entertainment is the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, Vivek Agrawal.
That would be an honor. It'd be an honor.
Yes.
So, Vivek, this has been such a great episode. At the end of each of our episodes, we have a bit of a familiar wrap up and a routine. Have a little bit of fun. We play a couple of games by way of a couple of questions. So let me know. Are you ready to have some fun?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So I'll start, and Seema and I will ping pong, or I think we've said we pickleball back and forth. And so we'll go through 4 questions. And the first one here, we live in a world where we wanna feel better right now. We want to do something. We want to know that listening to you changed our lives right now. So tell us one thing. It doesn't have to be related to our conversation or to music, that from the world of Vivek Agrawal to the world of Dinesh and Seema and to our listeners, we can be connected through a slight improvement that happens right now.
I would say the one tip I'd have is find a moment where you can have peace every day.
Love it.
Just you saying that. It's like, and zen.
Yeah. It's so good. I mean, I was listening to a book by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He talks about like going for a walk, or he sits in the jacuzzi and has a cigar. That's his moment of peace. But I really am starting to really believe this advice more and more in a different way now. In that, unless you create that moment, you fill it with we fill it with so many busy things that peace, magic, inspiration, whatever of your own creativity is cut off, because we're filling that time, and creating that moment for peace and for magic allows you to feel just a little bit more alive, and dare I say, a little bit more happy and human.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that moment of peace allows for reflection, right? It allows you to step away from all the things that may be distracting your mind from what it wants to think about, and allows it to like live in that.
Oh gosh, yeah. I think that's really one of the keys to being able to quote unquote quantum leap through to get to your goals in a meaningful way that doesn't suck you dry. You have to tap into that magic, that creativity, as much as we want to dismiss it as, at least my parents, my family. I know Dinesh, I can't speak for you, but art and creativity and writing and all of that just wasn't going to measure up to the math and the science. And, I think that when you do actually go back to that, it enables just a new richness in life, especially from our culture, which is so deeply dripping in the paintings and the artistry with the clothes and the food and the music and the communities. That just, there's so much there.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So with that, now that we've all been reminded to find a moment of peace every single day, we have a question for you from the last guest.
Okay.
And so our previous guest was Dr. Jyotsna Bhatt, and she is a psychotherapist based in New Jersey. And we had a wonderful conversation about what it means to be a South Asian male and those cultural implications. So one thing she left for you was, what does your own emotional language look like? What is working well for you? And what can you do better?
I think the part of my emotional language that's working well is that I can be grounded. So that centeredness allows me to look at the things that are happening in my life with almost an observer-centric mindset to just be like, oh wow, that's happening. That's really cool. I'm very grateful for it. But at the same time, allow me to objectively think through what's next. So I don't know. It has this powerful effect of giving me an ability to be staying present in the moment, but also not look so attached to every single moment that it disturbs me too much. I think if I were to look at where I can improve, certainly that energy is something that I protect quite a bit. And then it's easy for it to get rattled by, external circumstances, and so finding a way to deal with more of those, but have it reflect back off so that I can, continue to focus on my own purpose and work is something that I'm constantly working on.
Yeah. Can you poke a little bit more at that? Because I've had someone tell me the same thing. To protect my energy was actually their comment to me. So I'm curious, what you touched a little bit just now on that, but really, what does that mean?
Well, I think for anyone who's taking a big risk, and this is subject of a lot of our conversation, there are going to be a lot of things that discourage that. And but at the same time, the fact that we're taking that risk and doing it at all is very inspiring, right? So finding ways to continue to build that community that will encourage it, and at the same time understanding when a community, again, there are a lot of great people in the world, right? Humanity is beautiful, but they may not all be right for you at a certain time to be able to help you protect that energy and continue on your path the way that you need to. And so being able to self-check on both how do you continue forward, and two, how do you make sure that you can allow all of those forces to coexist?
Accept them all, not fight any of it, but just be with it. So powerful. It's a learned skill. Fantastic answers, Vivek. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm curious to know what your question is for the next guest. We don't know who it is, but ask away.
Okay, my question for the next guest is, if you were able to start your journey sooner, when and why?
When and why, or when and what?
Why? Because the reason I say why is because they're already on the journey of what they're doing, but is there a different point in time under which that would have been interesting to them? And why is that point in time particularly important?
Can we have you on all the time? You can just ask questions.
I think Seema's gonna fire me, and you're gonna.
I know, right?
You're gonna get a new co-host gig.
Then you'll just end up getting music all the time. So
that sounds like a good deal. No offense, Dinesh.
No, it's great. We'll trade. I'll become the musician. You become the podcast host.
Exactly. He's got the ring light now. We're good.
We're good.
Oh, it's good. I just got to get like a piano.
Yeah,
Vivek, we can't thank you enough for coming on here, for the friendship, for the generosity with your time. But one of the ways we try to thank our guests for coming on is we make a small contribution to a cause that's near and dear to their heart, right? It helps you to share something that you care about. It helps to bring awareness of new causes to our listeners. And it's a way for us to thank you in some way. Is there a cause or organization that's near and dear to you that you'd like to share with us?
There's an organization I've gotten to know the team behind it, called the Chicago Custom, and they've been building this community of South Asian creatives and professionals who are very interested in the arts and very interested in elevating South Asian voices throughout the Chicagoland area. And I think that they're doing some really interesting events and showcases to bring more people to light out here.
Thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you. And thank you again for having me. It was super fun. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to even chat with me. And I'm very grateful that you reached out.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. I'm definitely going to be listening to this episode and re-listening anytime I ever need inspiration, because
very kind.
The Almighty knows the voice in my head is quite loud. And so we just need to show her some love. But tell us, as I want our listeners to be able to connect with you, to find you, to keep up with all the amazing things that you're doing and to support you. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to next, what you're excited about, as well as where our audience can find you.
I am committed this year to remaking a new song every week through the end of the year. I'm releasing them on TikTok and Instagram. I'm doing full versions of everyone's favorites now. So if there's songs that particularly resonate with folks, then and I'm personally very interested in the music, then I'll go ahead and finish the songs. So my plan is to continue these snippets of remakes, release a full album of some of these remakes later this year, host a listening party for those interested, and I'm planning on doing one here in Chicago, but also would love to do them in other cities if folks would be interested in co-hosting. And other than that, I'm open to performances. So I perform regularly at like cultural events, private events. I open for other artists. So more of those are going to be on my social media channels. My username is Viagrawal. VIA. Yeah, it is. And there's an amazing story about that. Like when I was a freshman in college, they were assigning usernames to folks based on their name, and there was already, I think, like a Vikas Agrawal in the computer science department, and so they took the first two letters of my first name and then my full last name, and my email became by Agrawal, and I was like, this is amazing. And so
I love it.
like, you can't make this up.
They didn't see it.
Yeah, they didn't see it. And what's crazy is like when I'd email professors, they'd be like, I thought you were spamming me. And then I'd show up to class and be like, hey, you didn't respond. And then they were like, that was awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so but I'm very active, regularly, like sharing remakes on TikTok, other music along with my remakes on Instagram, and both as shows come through, I'll be sharing those, and sharing new events as they happen, and as I start releasing my album, I'd love to have folks listen.
Yeah,
we cannot wait.
Sign me up. I'm buying them, and we'd love to have you. I will come to Chicago and come to your listening party.
That'd be awesome.
We'd love to have you in DC. One of my friends, Kavita Jaspal, just started a podcast called Extra Shot of Chai. And it's a little bit like Coffee with Karan, where they talk about Bollywood movies. But the reason I'm mentioning that is that she organizes large events in the South for South Asians in the DC area. And I'd love to connect you with her, and we can host a listening party.
That'd be super fun. Yeah, we can make it a lot of fun.
Yeah, I will be there. You guys just tell me the date and time.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, Vivek, thank you so much.